wave did not just hit this bay, it climbed a mountain. On the night of July 9th, 1958, in a remote Alaskan fjord called Lituya Bay, water rose so high that it stripped trees from the mountainside up to 1,720 feet above sea level, higher than most skyscrapers, higher than any normal human mind would expect water to go. And the most disturbing part is that this wave did not travel across an ocean to get there. It was born inside the bay itself, which meant that for the people already on that water, the disaster began almost on top of them. Lituya Bay cuts into the coast of Alaska like a wound left open by ice. It is narrow, cold, and boxed in by steep glacial walls that make the place feel less like a bay and more like a trap. From above, it looks brutally beautiful. Dark water, snow-streaked ridges, hanging glaciers. A silence so complete it feels almost staged. But the silence is misleading. The entrance is narrow, the inner arms push deep into unstable terrain, and the mountains rise too sharply for anything violent to be forgiven. Force does not have much room to escape here. It gets cornered. Long before the famous wave, people already knew this place felt wrong. The currents near the mouth had a reputation. The water could turn dangerous fast. Explorers noticed it. Sailors feared it. Lituya Bay never looked like a monster. It looked like stillness. And that is what made it worse. It hid its violence inside shape, depth, and confinement, as if the landscape had been arranged with too much tension and nowhere to release it. Then the Earth moved. Just after 10 p.m., a massive earthquake, about magnitude 7.8, ripped through the Fairweather fault. The mountains around the bay shook hard. Rock cracked loose. Ice shifted. And near the head of the bay, above Gilbert Inlet, an enormous mass of stone broke free and plunged downward. In seconds, tens of millions of cubic meters of rock crashed into the water. Not pebbles, not a cliff edge. A huge section of mountain dropping into a confined arm of the bay with catastrophic force. The water had nowhere to go except up. It blasted across the inlet and tore into the opposite slope, ripping trees from the mountainside, stripping soil away, scraping entire sections of forest down to bare rock. The scar reached a maximum run-up of 1,720 feet. The bay did not simply flood. It lunged upward. It climbed. It carved itself into the mountain so violently that the landscape carried the mark for decades afterward. A pale, raw trimline circling the dark forest like the outline of something impossible. Even now, when people look at aerial images of Lituya Bay, they are looking at a place the water once skinned alive. There were boats inside the bay that night. That is where the story stops feeling distant. One boat carried a man and his young son. Another had a husband and wife aboard. When the earthquake struck, the people on the water knew something was wrong, but they did not yet understand what was building at the head of the bay. One survivor would later describe being lifted so high that he could look down at treetops beneath him, not beside him, beneath him. A fisherman in a small boat raised above a forest because the water under him had become a moving wall. Another man, seeing something monstrous coming toward them through the dark, handed a life jacket to his 7-year-old son and told him to pray. One boat was carried over the spit near the mouth of the bay and survived. Another somehow rode the wave and escaped. But the couple on the third boat vanished. They were never seen again. In total, 5 people died. And that number feels colder, not smaller, because of where it happened. This was not a crowded city, not a busy coastline, not a place full of warning sirens and traffic and noise. It was remote wilderness, a silent bay, a handful of people on the water, and still the planet found them. What happened in Lituya Bay was not a classic tsunami rolling in from far away. It was a local megatsunami, created almost instantly by earthquake, landslide, confined water, and a landscape built to amplify force. The mountain fell, the bay answered, and the wave raced through the inlet with almost no distance between birth and impact. There was no long horizon to watch, no time for the brain to catch up. It happened inside the same walls that trapped it. And what makes the place even darker is that 1958 was not the first warning. Evidence suggests giant waves had struck Lituya Bay before. This was not a single freak act of nature that no one could imagine repeating. The ingredients were already there. Unstable slopes, glacial carving, deep water, seismic violence, and a narrow stone chamber ready to focus whatever entered it. The bay had done versions of this before. Not at that scale, not in that exact way, but enough to leave a pattern behind. Enough to make the place feel less like scenery and more like memory. That is why the image of Lituya Bay stays with people. Once you know what happened there, the beauty curdles. The water looks too calm. The mountains look too heavy. The silence starts to feel loaded, as if the entire landscape is holding its breath. The bay becomes one of those rare places that permanently changes after you understand it. Not because its shape is different, but because your eyes are. You stop seeing an Alaskan fjord. You start seeing a confined chamber of rock, ice, and water that once turned itself into the tallest wave ever recorded on Earth. It does not glow like lava. It does not burn like a wildfire. It does not need flames to feel apocalyptic. It only needs gravity, cold water, unstable stone, and one violent second. That is enough. Lituya Bay proves that the world does not always kill with fire. Sometimes it kills with geometry. Sometimes the deadliest thing in front of you is not an eruption or a storm, but a beautiful place built the wrong way for one terrible moment. So when you hear that Lituya Bay produced the tallest wave ever recorded, do not picture a statistic. Picture a section of mountain collapsing into black water. Picture a wall of force climbing so high it reaches the forested slopes and keeps going. Picture men on fishing boats staring down at treetops. Picture a quiet bay in the dark suddenly becoming too small to contain what had just been dropped into it. Because this was not just a wave. It was a landscape snapping into violence all at once. But Alaska is not the only place where a mountain turned earth and water into a death sentence. In Colombia, Nevado del Ruiz unleashed a different kind of nightmare. It did not send a giant wall of water through a remote fjord. It melted ice, released volcanic mudflows, and buried Armero in darkness while people were still inside their homes. In a single night, around 23,000 lives were erased. In the next video, we go there, to a place where the warning came. The mountain still struck, and an entire town vanished under mud, ash, and silence.